All right. Hello, Facebook friends. Welcome to a Facebook Live chat about the boys on the tracks. This is a case. I'm Jason Pederson. To my right is Keith Rounsavall, a private detective and retired Little Rock police detective. This is a case that I've been looking at for a month. Keith, you've been investigating it for at least a year.
Right.
And some of you out there on Facebook have been following it for the better part of 30 years. It's a case in Arkansas that has become infamous, mysterious, and recognized for all the wrong reasons, namely that two teenagers are dead and no one's ever been charged. Keith, you have been hired by Linda Ives and Larry Ives to look into this case. How did they contact you, and when did they contact you?
Well, I first got involved with another private investigator who was working for them, and he called me and we met. He later had some health issues, and I just kind of took his spot.
So he was looking for someone to pass the file to,
well,
continue on his work.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's a development in the case we're going to get to in a little bit. We're going to also get to your questions in a little bit. First, Keith and I are going to talk about the case, where things are going right now and what's the new development, and we'll probably answer some of your questions in the next 10 minutes. So hold off on your questions. When we start seeing some questions pop up on Facebook, we'll get to those. There's a new witness in the case. The witness contacted a judge involved that's overseeing a lawsuit that Larry and Linda Ives have filed to try and get documents related to the case. And Keith, you spent a lot of time with this witness. You drove him from the West Coast here to Arkansas. Tell us how that came about.
Well, I had been in contact with this individual by text and over the phone for several months. And first I had to gain his trust. Because he didn't trust anybody in Arkansas. He said, I never want to go back to that state based on his experience here. So I had to initially get his trust, and once I did that, I decided to go to where he was and went to the West Coast to visit with him and sat down with him and spent the next 2 months with him.
And on that trip, I guess you guys probably talked a lot about this case.
Yeah, we did. We talked a lot about it.
Now, you were in law enforcement how many years?
25 years.
You've probably got a pretty good BS detector.
I would hope so after 25 years, yeah.
This is a gentleman who's never been linked to this case. He's never come up in any movies, in any books, in any articles, in any affidavits. You were probably skeptical a little bit going in, I imagine.
Absolutely.
What was it that he said that caused you to believe him?
Well, it was the details that he had, as well as him placing himself at the scene of a murder. And, he just had nothing to gain and a lot to lose. And, and then after visiting with him for 2 months, the more I visited with him and was in contact with him, I just realized that he was being honest. I took him to the railroad tracks. He showed me exactly what happened there, who was where, and he kind of described everything on the scene.
All right, again, Jason Pederson and private investigator Keith Rounsavall discussing the boys on the tracks. For some of you who may be new to Arkansas or maybe have forgotten some of the details of this case, this is a case that got its origin on August 23rd of 1987. It was 4 o'clock in the morning, and Kevin Ives and Don Henry were hit by a Union Pacific train that was traveling 55 miles an hour down the tracks. Their bodies were laid out on the tracks, prone with a rifle next to them, both of them side by side, and the train engineer said they never moved despite the horns, the whistles, the screeching brakes. The two boys never moved, which led the engineers and some investigators to believe that they were likely dead before they were placed on the tracks. However, the coroner at the time issued a controversial ruling about why they were killed. He said it was accidental. What was his logic to that?
Yeah, he said they had smoked too much marijuana and had passed out on the tracks, which was, unbelievable. But that's what he ruled.
And he stuck with it.
Oh, he did, yeah.
And the sheriff at the time believed it.
Well, yeah, he would believe it, yeah.
He didn't really investigate. How much investigation was done in the, as an investigator, how critical is it to get your investigation done in the first month, first few days, first 6 months at least?
Well, the initial important thing is to get a good crime scene investigation. Mm-hmm. Well, they ended up leaving one of the boys' foot on the tracks, so that was not a very good crime scene, maintaining the crime scene and maintaining all the evidence that was found on the crime scene.
And as far as finding witnesses, interviewing witnesses, trying to figure out what happened, was a thorough investigation done from the start?
Absolutely not.
when did a thorough, if ever, when did an investigation?
There never has been a thorough investigation.
I mean, there was a grand jury.
Well, yeah, but it was never, they never were allowed to give their findings.
The grand jury was frustrated, weren't they? The members.
Absolutely.
They recognized this as a murder, and they wanted to get some resolution, some justice, have somebody charged, but that never happened.
No, never did. And it languished and languished, and the FBI got involved in an investigation. State police were involved, and they all shut their investigations down.
All right. I am working to get some of the questions that are going to start coming in. The new witness, he's Billy Jack Haynes. He is a former WWE wrestler. These guys are characters, all of them. They all have had, you know, he admits he was dealing in drugs. He admits that he used drugs. How credible can a witness like this be? He's sued the WWE for brain trauma, for head trauma.
Right.
He's got a lot of strikes against him if he's going to be a key witness in a murder investigation.
He does.
But yet you still believe his account can overcome all of those negatives.
Well, I think a reasonable person could listen to what he's got to say and determine for themselves whether he's telling the truth or not. Just so happens that Linda Ives and I both believe he's telling completely truthful. Everything he says is truthful, and yeah, we believe him.
So he was looking for someone to and Linda Ives has heard everything over the years, every theory, every possible suspect. She'd never heard his name.
Never, until he called her.
He would be off the grid. If this were to ever get reopened, he would never pop up. He was safely out of this situation.
Absolutely.
Yet he has reinserted himself for what? Why?
Well, that's a good question.
But you've asked him that.
I've asked him that, and he's just said, you know, after years of being on prescription drugs, I got clean. I found the Lord, and I got a conscience, and I couldn't live with myself without calling Linda and telling her I was there.
There's a movie out right now, 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri. I don't know if you've seen it. But
I haven't.
Woody Harrelson plays a sheriff in that movie, and he gives a speech in that movie where he says, you know, this is a mother trying to solve an older, her daughter was murdered, trying to solve it. And the sheriff says, a lot of times these cases, it doesn't matter what we do, we can't solve it. Someone's got to slip up, come forward, tell a cellmate, have a crisis of conscience and confess. Is that what you believe has happened with him and could be the difference in this case?
Absolutely. When I first got involved in the case, I said to Linda, I said, there's only a couple of ways that this is going to be solved, and one of them is somebody on their deathbed comes forward and gives a deathbed confession, and another is somebody has like their conscience is bothering them for what happened, and that's exactly what this guy says happened to him. He found the Lord and got clean and decided he needed to do something to help Linda out.
Now, tonight at 10 o'clock, we will have a recap of this case. For those of you who are unfamiliar with it, we've gone into our Channel 7 archives. We've found some of the images and the key details of the story moving through the years from 1987. Tomorrow night at 10, we'll take you back to the night of the night in question, and we'll allow Billy Jack Haynes to describe what happened, his recollection of what happened that night. Let's go to some of the questions that have been coming in. A lot of people concerned about the safety of Billy Jack Haynes. You know, there have been a lot of mysterious deaths of people associated with this case over the years.
Absolutely.
Half a dozen or more.
Right.
Has Billy Jack ever expressed any concerns for his safety because he's coming forward as a witness?
Absolutely.
Is there any precautions being taken to?
Well, he's watching his back. He's being more observant than he was prior to me being involved, because I've told him over and over again, buddy, you need to watch your back. You need to be aware of your surroundings, and he has become more aware of his surroundings than he was when I first met him.
Now, he's a long way from Arkansas, so that probably helps.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Will he come to Arkansas if asked?
Well, I don't know. We'd have to ask him that.
You know, Billy Jack Haynes has provided the Ives family and provided you with a 21-minute long video where he confesses to his involvement. He says he didn't murder the boys, but he was there and he helped place them on the tracks. He confesses to his involvement, he apologizes, and he names names. He names everybody who was there that night. And this is now on video. You've got it in several different locations, secured.
I do.
And what do you hope to do with that video?
Well, at some point, I hope some law enforcement agency, credible law enforcement agency, will come and ask to see what I've got. We've already been talking about it. I've discussed it with Billy Jack, and he knows that that's a possibility, and he's willing to participate in furthering the investigation.
All right, along those lines, I got an email today from the Saline County Sheriff's Department from Public Information Officer Jeff Silk. He says he can't speak on the record or off the record because this is an open investigation. The case that we are covering is obviously open, and as such, any information that may help us would greatly be appreciated. It appears you have been interviewing sources that may have information pertaining to our investigation. We are duty-bound to follow up on leads that could assist in that investigation. I would very much like to have access to these sources and respectfully request that you contact me in reference to arranging a date and a time to meet. If you do not have access to these sources, I would respectfully request that you provide me with information as to who does have access so we can arrange for a meeting. So it sounds like, based on that email, that the Saline County Sheriff's Office is interested in talking to Billy Jack Haynes, talking to you, finding out what you guys know.
Right.
Would you be agreeable at least to share the video with the Saline County Sheriff's?
I'm going to sit down with them and share what I know, but reluctantly.
Have they made that request of you?
No, they have not.
Okay. So I can give them your information and
sure.
encourage them to call you.
Please do.
Now, you say reluctantly. I know when I talk to Linda, and you'll hear what Linda has to say tomorrow night on Channel 7 News at 10. We did a sit-down interview with her in her home. I know when you talk to Linda, she is pessimistic about how much Saline County will do with this case. Why is that?
Well, because the sheriff in Saline County is kin to one of the suspects. And she's never been comfortable with Saline County and the lack of investigation that they did 30 years ago, and not keeping the evidence that was collected. I'll be interested to see what they've collected and what they still have.
She's involved in a lawsuit, a federal lawsuit, to try to get access to the files in this case. Is that for you, so you can review these files?
No, that's not for me at all. That was something she had going prior to me being involved.
How did her lawsuit, that federal lawsuit, how did that help her get in touch with Billy Jack Haynes?
Well, evidently Billy Jack Haynes had done some research and found that there was a hearing set in federal court, and he called the judge in that federal court and talked to the judge, and the judge asked him what he had to do with the case, and turned out he was just trying to get a hold of Linda, and Linda got his information and later made contact with him.
Let's see, Chris mentions that he remembers this was on Unsolved Mysteries. This case was featured with Robert Stack on Unsolved Mysteries years ago. Have you seen that episode?
Yeah, I've watched it. Yeah, it's been years ago.
So that's national attention brought to this case, yet that didn't result in any suspects being charged or any developments.
No.
How hopeful or optimistic is Linda Ives that our coverage tonight and tomorrow night might move the needle towards that direction?
Well, she's hoping the needle gets moved, but, she's hoping that law enforcement will do their job. And we'll see if that happens or not.
What about state police? Is she hopeful that state police would take another look at it?
That's a possibility, yeah. We're looking at several different options.
Okay. Let's see. A lot of questions about Fahmy Malik, the coroner or this medical examiner at the time. Is Fahmy Malik still alive?
He is, as I understand it, living in Florida.
Okay. What about those who are deceased? The longer a case goes on, the more witnesses or key people could be deceased.
Right.
What key people to this case are no longer alive that you couldn't interview if you wanted to?
Well, there were 7 individuals there, according to our witness, and 2 of those individuals are now deceased. There are 5 that remain alive.
Okay. Billy Jack, he says he didn't kill the boys, but he was there and he put them on the tracks. Can he be charged with anything?
He certainly could, yeah.
What, accessory to murder?
Well, he could be charged with murder. Anybody involved in the crime of murder or any other crime that is an accessory to it can be charged with the crime.
And he knows that?
Oh, he does, yeah.
You mentioned his health isn't great nowadays.
No, it's not.
What about his finances? You know, he's a former WWE wrestler, probably made some good money back in the day.
Well, he's made some good money and lost a lot of money, according to him, and he's just been involved in this lawsuit against WWF, and I understand that it's they've just settled for $100 million, and
really?
He's going to get a part of that. I don't know how much.
Is that according to him? Because I hadn't seen Vince McMahon crying about that on TV.
Right.
You'd think he'd have something to say if that were the case.
You know, I understand that there's a gag order from the court on that, but that's my understanding is what he understands.
But you had to go get him and bring him to Arkansas, so he can't be flush with cash. He couldn't buy a plane ticket and come.
No, he's not flush with cash at all.
So he is putting himself at legal risk by coming forward with this story.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Let's see. We are watching. Thanks for covering the case. What did he tell as to why the boys were murdered? We're going to share that tomorrow night at 10, although we only got to watch 2 minutes of that 21-minute long video. A couple of reasons for that. One, you want to save it for investigators.
Right.
And two, pretrial publicity. You want to try to limit that so if charges are ever brought, the defendants can't point their fingers at us or anybody else and say pretrial publicity.
That's right.
So they showed us the first couple minutes. However, Billy Jack did go out to the crime scene with private investigator Keith Rounsavall. By the way, your Private Snoop Investigations?
Yes, it is.
And that's on Facebook if people want to learn more about the case. There's some information posted there. You guys went out to the scene, and he recounted what he recalled, and you shared that with us. So tomorrow night you will hear what Billy Jack says exactly happened that night through your account, through talking to him.
Right.
Because Billy Jack had already gone back to Portland by the time I got a tip that he'd even been in town. Meeting with the Ives family. And he apologized to Linda, didn't he? Were you there at that meeting?
Absolutely.
Was it tearful? I mean, she's been waiting 30 years to hear someone say, I did it and I'm sorry. What was that like? Was she angry? Was she?
No, she wasn't. She was...
and Larry, too. We're always
Larry Ives was there as well. And they both were skeptical to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
He has met with them on a couple of occasions. And... he was very apologetic for his involvement in it, and he held Linda's hand while making one of the videos, and from his heart gave a statement outlining what happened that night.
All right, again, my name's Jason Pederson with Channel 7. Keith Rounsavall with Private Snoop Investigations is a private investigator hired by Linda and Larry Ives to look into the Boys on the Tracks mystery. I say hired, but they're not really paying you. You're kind of doing this pro bono, is that right?
That's right.
But it costs money. You went to Portland. You drove him to Portland and you drove him back. That's money. It costs money to try to track down witnesses, to make phone calls. You got phone bills. There is a GoFundMe page set up to help you pay for expenses since you're doing this pro bono for the Ives family.
Right.
Tell folks how they can find that.
They can find that by going to GoFundMe.com, Kevin Ives, Don Henry.
Just search those names.
Yeah.
You know, if this is a case that's stuck in your craw for the last 30 years, that you feel justice wasn't served, that you feel that the Ives family and the Henry family have always gotten a raw deal and you'd like to see that change, one way you can help is to contribute $10, $15, whatever you can to this effort so that the quest for justice can continue. Justice, unfortunately, in this country often has a price tag, and researching a case has a price tag. So I appreciate the work you've put in so far, and I hope that the public and the viewing public can help you out. A lot of mentions here, and we're not going to get into this tomorrow night, but a lot of mentions here about the Clintons. Does Billy Jack Haynes mention the Clintons in his 21-minute long video?
The 21-minute long video, he does, yes.
Does he mention Barry Seal and Mina?
He does.
Now, a lot of times when you hear Bill Clinton and Barry Seal and Mina, automatically people's eyes roll in the back of their head. Here we go again, conspiracy theory. What did that do for you or for the Ives when he mentioned Bill Clinton, Barry Seal, or Mina?
Well, this has been rumored for the last 25, 30 years, so it really wasn't a shock when that name came up, or any of the other names that were mentioned by Billy Jack, because it's been rumored out there for years.
We've got a listener. Thanks for listening, by the way, out there on Facebook. We're going to go till 7:30. I'm going through your questions. We've got a question that says, we always hear about the Ives family. What about the Henry family? They lost a son too. It has been Linda Ives that's primarily over the years stayed involved and been a champion on this.
Absolutely.
What about the Henry family? Have you talked to them lately?
I have never talked to them.
Don't know how they feel about this development?
I don't know how they feel about what we have found. And
are they still alive in the state?
Curtis Henry is still alive, and I understand still in the state. Okay.
Well, the Henry family, if you're watching, our condolences. I hope that this coverage and this witness can help bring peace to you as well. That's all of our hope. Let's see. I've been criticized, rightfully so, probably on Facebook for walking on the tracks during our promos. Evidently, it's trespassing. All I could tell you, it was a straight line. We had plenty of warning if a train had come. A train didn't come the second time we were there. The first time it did, and we weren't anywhere near the track. So, you know, if Union Pacific actually did send us an email saying, hey, you know, we'd prefer you not go on the tracks anymore, and we won't, but we felt it was essential to tell this story, to actually go to the site where these boys were hit by the train and found. The Saline County Sheriff now, someone's asking who the Saline County Sheriff now is.
You know, I don't know his name, but I know he is.
I do. It was Rodney Wright.
Rodney Wright.
And I did put in a request last week to talk to Rodney Wright. It was on the same day that a couple of deputies were involved in a traffic accident, so I didn't expect to hear from him right away. And as I mentioned earlier in this Facebook Live session, I did hear from his public information officer just about an hour before this broadcast that they can't talk about the case. It's an open case, but they're willing and really would like to hear what you have to say, what Billy Jack Haynes has to say on his 21-minute long video, and which only Channel 7 has even seen a portion of at this point. And at some point, he's going to have to come to Arkansas if this is going to get serious. He's going to have to come back to Arkansas, isn't he?
Well, probably.
Because people have a right to talk to their accuser, to question their accuser.
Absolutely.
And so he'll have to come and answer questions. I'm sure you guys were pretty nice when he recorded his statement. Maybe didn't ask him any questions at all. But at some point, he's going to have to answer some tough questions.
Absolutely.
And he's ready. He's willing
ready
to do that.
Yeah.
All right. If this witness helped place the dead, this is from Katrina, if this witness helped place the dead bodies on the track, that would make him guilty of obstruction of justice, I would think. Is it a crime if you know about a murder and don't come forward?
It can be, yeah.
Okay, so at the very least, he would be obstructing justice by not coming forward.
Well, I don't know if that would be the exact
Sounds
crime
more like
he'd be charged
accessory
with.
to murder.
Yeah. There's a lot of different ways they could handle that.
A lot of people questioning Billy Jack Haynes and his credibility. Has he been involved in anything else that's controversial that would make him less of a character witness? To your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge at all. I have done a background on him, and I didn't find anything other than seeing him on video and wrestling.
Got a question: is Dan Harmon still alive?
He is.
Dan Harmon he was appointed special prosecutor by Richard Garrett when the grand jury was going on. Later, Dan Harmon was, for those of you who haven't followed the case over the years, Dan Harmon was later convicted and sent to prison on drug-related charges. One of the other law enforcement officers that Billy Jack Haynes says was at the scene that night was also convicted of drug charges and went to prison. So the allegation that drugs were involved and that the people involved were a part of it, it's kind of, over the years, gotten some credibility just through arrests made of the people rumored to be involved.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no doubt that some of the people he named are infamous for some of the crimes that they have later committed.
When I heard Billy Jack's story, one thing that triggered a I wonder about that question in my mind was he said at the scene that night, someone made a phone call. Now, this was 1987. Cell phones weren't readily available to most people in 1987. Have you looked into that? I mean, is it possible that someone there had a sat phone or a cell phone and was able to make a call to someone to get instructions on what to do?
Absolutely. Back in 1987, I was with the Little Rock Police Department. I had a bag phone.
But did it have to stay hooked up in your car, or could you carry it around?
No, you could carry it around. You could charge the battery up. And then they have, as he described the phone, it was one of those that kind of looked like a brick, and that had an antenna sticking out of the top of it. And he and I went and did some research. He showed me exactly what it looked like. I typed in 1987 era cell phones, and up popped a bunch of pictures. And
now, there weren't cell towers all over the place back then.
That's right.
And this is out kind of in a rural area.
Right.
Kind of in the middle of nowhere.
Yep.
Would you be? Is it a sat phone? Would you be able to get a signal?
Well, he said down off of the tracks is high above
right.
Where the incident really occurred, and he said they could not get any signal down there. That the person that made the call initially went to the top of the tracks, and then he was able to get a signal from there.
Okay. And Billy Jack says who he called and what was basically what whoever he talked to said, leave no witnesses.
Absolutely, yeah.
Billy Jack says in his statement that not only did he place the boys on the tracks, place their gun next to them, but he also had a video camera and was told to stay there and make a videotape of the train hitting the boys. Does he have that videotape?
He has had possession of it. He does not have that videotape with him right now.
But it still exists.
It still exists, and that's what we're trying to do is recover it.
So that would go a long ways to supporting his claim if, in fact, that videotape exists.
Absolutely.
Let's see. After watching the movie Made in America with Tom Cruise, this case has become very interesting to me. This is from Amy. I've been watching documentaries regarding all involved. If someone wants information about this case, it's readily available. Mara Leverett wrote a book called The Boys on the Tracks, a very well-sourced book. There was a documentary produced in the late 80s, The Mina Connection, that detailed the Boys on the Tracks, was just part of a larger story. There are articles online. You can go to the Facebook page, which is go to Facebook and put in Justice for Kevin Ives and Don Henry.
Right.
Got a lot of links to documents, to pictures, to news articles. This case is well known in Arkansas, but back then it also got some national attention, largely in part because President Clinton was running for, or Governor Clinton was running for president.
Absolutely, yeah.
How much play did this case get around the nation?
You know, I'm not sure. I
know it was in the LA Times. They did a big article.
I'm sure it got some play. I'm not sure how much play it got.
Did you, in your research, find people who were stonewalled, who believed this was fishy and then something went wrong, wanted to investigate or wanted to do tests on evidence or wanted to get to the bottom of it, but were, cut off by their superiors?
Absolutely. There are several good law enforcement officers that lost their careers because they wanted to pursue things and they were not allowed to pursue them. One of those guys was even, he was a state trooper. He was poisoned with anthrax. And there's another guy who was an IRS agent. He lost his career because he refused to perjure himself like his bosses wanted him to. He had to retire or quit from the IRS. So there's a lot of people. There's an FBI agent, female FBI agent, that was wanting to do the right thing and wanting to continue the investigation, and she was shut down and vilified by her bosses. This whole thing stinks from every angle.
Well, Bob Govar at the U.S. Attorney's Office said he wanted to bring it to the grand jury and wasn't allowed to. There was a crime lab investigator who wanted to test some clothing, and he said he wasn't allowed to. So a lot of people have said they were stifled. We got up to, we're approaching 800 eyeballs on us right now for this Facebook Live chat. We've got about a half hour to go. We're taking your questions. Jason Pederson with Keith Rounsavall. Keith is a private investigator, a retired Little Rock police detective. How long were you on the force?
25 years.
25 years with LRPD. He is now working for the Ives family, investigating the Boys on the Tracks. He's been good enough to answer your questions tonight, discuss the case, try to generate interest in the story we're going to have tonight that will recap the case, and the story tomorrow night that will allow a new witness in the case, Billy Jack Haynes, to share with you what he says for the first time happened on the tracks that night when Don Henry and Kevin Ives were hit by a Union Pacific train. The boys witnessed something to do with a drug meet, according to a lot of the videos out there. Did Billy Jack say... Billy Jack says he was there to make sure the drug drop wasn't intercepted, and it wasn't. Did he ever say to you, does he think that those two teenagers were out on the tracks, assuming what he says is true, to intercept a drug drop, or were they just wrong place, wrong time?
He thinks they're wrong place at the wrong time. He doesn't have any information, other than they just happened to be on the tracks. And we think, according to what my information is, we think they were hunting. They had a spotlight, and they also had a .22 rifle that they were spotlighting deer, we think.
So they were out at 4 in the morning with a rifle and a flashlight, just spotlighting deer,
right,
and just walked up on what was basically a posse of people that had taken some drugs that were dropped from planes.
Absolutely.
People back at the time said low-flying planes were a regular thing around that area of Alexander, western Saline County, or eastern Saline County. Have you found that to be true through reports?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've talked to several people that they said it was not unusual for airplanes to fly low over that area. One of the individuals I interviewed said that she had seen, and her son had seen, a large plane fly over that area. They thought it was going to crash, but it flew low over that area and then eventually gained altitude and left the area.
Facebook viewer named Mike says, they aren't as innocent as mom wants to make it seem. I guess he's talking about Kevin and Don. Now, this was a 16 and a 17-year-old boy. I've got an 18-year-old son. I know they can get into some mischief. Did they have any criminal records, these two?
No, they did not.
Did they have any connection to the drug underworld that was alleged to be occurring in Saline County at the time?
No, not at all.
Even if they were getting into something or trying to intercept drugs, which no one has really ever credibly said they were, death is certainly not the penalty for that.
No, absolutely not. And I don't think they were, they were typical 16, 17-year-old boys. Now, they were out adventurous and probably got into some things that they didn't want Linda to know about or Curtis Henry to know about, but they were not bad kids.
Some of you who are tuning in now and missed the beginning of this Facebook chat, a new witness has come forward, Billy Jack Haynes. He lives out on the West Coast. We've got a question here from Wilma. If this person knows everything and has kept quiet all this time, he should go to jail and sit. You mentioned before what his motive is, to clear his conscience in coming forward. Had he ever before now thought about coming forward and just didn't have the guts or didn't have the moral resolve to do it? Or?
Well, he said he was addicted to prescription painkillers after being injured numerous times in the ring, and that the drugs took over. Those prescription drugs took his life over, and he never thought about it until he cleaned up and realized what he had done and where he was and who was involved, and that's when he decided to call Linda.
We can say, I think, one of the gentlemen that Billy Jack Haynes alleges was on the tracks that night was a club owner named Keith McCaskill. And the reason I think we can say that is because Keith McCaskill was murdered shortly after this.
Yeah.
He was stabbed to death, 100 times?
He was stabbed over 100 times.
Have you looked into his murder?
Well, I have a little bit. I haven't, I've been concentrating on working for Linda Ives, but I've done some research on it, and there was a guy that was charged with it that lived next door, who I understand was not really fully